will be all about how one magic stone has a whole lot of uses. It's the Viking Sunstone. This stone was said to accurately pinpoint the position of the sun even through a cloudy, stormy, or twilight sky. To quote an explanation, when you're looking through the sunstone, you are not looking for colors but for shadows. If you draw a dot on the top of the crystal and look through it from the bottom, then two dots will appear. If you hold the crystal up to the sky and rotate the crystal until the two dots have the exact same intensity or darkness, at that angle, the upward facing surface indicates the direction of the sun. The oldest sunstone that could have been used for navigation was found amongst a wreckage of a warship called the Alderney, which sank between England and France in 1592. Archaeologists made the assumption that this crystal was used for navigation because it was found about a meter away from another navigation tool. So in other words, speculations, because it could have been a paperweight for all we know. But it was in the Raoul's Pater, which is written in the 12th century, that's used to support the navigation theory. A story from King Olaf Haraldsson II, set in 1030 CE, tells how he was visited by a rich and wise farmer. Said farmer tells the king he mastered the skill where he can tell the time of day and night even when the sky is hidden by clouds, without a sunstone. And so, to quote, the king made the people look out and they could nowhere see a clear sky. He then asked Sigurd, the farmer, to tell where the sun was at that time. He gave clear assertion. Then the king made them fetch a solar stone and held it up and saw where the light radiated from the stone, and thus directly verified Sigurd's prediction. Guess two things were proven true in that text: a farmer has magic powers, and Vikings use sunstones. And while I'm still on the Vikings, may as well bring up number 9, another inexplicable invention of theirs, the Uberfeld swords. Ah, Scandinavian words. I feel like my tongue is just gonna jump out of my mouth and run away trying to say them sometimes. You ever been to IKEA and just read that stuff? Anyways, what makes these swords so inexplicable? We aren't sure how they're made. Listen to this. We'll be learning about Damascus steel in the next point, but it's believed the Scans may have borrowed this technique or even materials from the Damascus steel process in order to make their legendary swords. To quote, archaeologists were shocked when finding these Viking blades because the technology needed to produce such pure metal wouldn't be invented for another 800 years. What reaffirms archaeologists' belief that the steel pattern was not just mimicked but actually shared between the Scans and the Middle East was a 9th century Viking grave that was found and excavated in 2014. Inscribed on the warrior's sword was 4/2 Allah, written in Islam. This could be a massive link between the two worlds that confirms the sharing of knowledge, or at least a steel for steel trade. And as stated, Damascus steel is next on our countdown, coming in at number 8. Some of y'all may have heard of this one by now, especially if you're a regular viewer on our channel. If so, lots of love, and if not, join the fam by subscribing to the Hive. But anyways, what is Damascus steel? Well, it's a very special type of metal that was being produced out of raw material, wood steel, which was harvested in Asia. It was first used around 300 BCE, but the knowledge seems to have been inexplicably lost around the mid-18th century. The secret of making the Middle East Damascus steel has only re-emerged under modern-day scanning of electron microscopes. Turns out nanotechnology was heavily involved in Damascus steel production, as the materials were added to the steel's production to create chemical reactions at a quantum level, as explained by the archaeology expert K. Chris Hurst. Alongside Peter Pulfer, it stated that the metal developed a microstructure called carbide nanotubes, extremely hard tubes of carbon that are expressed on the surface and create the blade's hardness, Hurst explained. Materials added during the production of Damascus steel include cassia bark, milkweed, vanadium, chromium, manganese, cobalt, nickel, and some rare element traces which are presumably coming from mines in India. This may be why the Damascus steel recipe was lost. However, as Hurst wrote, what happened in the mid-18th century was that the chemical makeup of the raw material altered, and the minute quantities of one or more minerals disappeared, perhaps because a particular load was exhausted somewhere in the world.
Number 7. Newspapers. We still have newspapers around. We still have some people hucking them on your doorstep, I guess, if that's still a thing. Haven't seen that in a bit. I feel like we're on the last leg with newspapers, you know what I mean? They had a decent run though, okay? To be fair, they've been around for a while. What do they got, 131 BC to wherever iPhones were invented? That's not a bad go. That's not bad at all. 131 BC to iPhones. That's not a bad run. That's pretty good. In ancient times, daily acts and events, they were often recorded and disseminated through newspapers known as acta diurna, or daily acts, also known as newspapers. These newspapers were introduced during the Roman Empire around 131 BC, and it contained news and accounts of daily events such as public speeches, trials, and ideally military victories. The newspapers were written in Latin and they were posted in public places for citizens to read. They were an important source of information for citizens in Rome, and in fact they were the only form of communication back then, so it was important. It was like an audition. As soon as the list goes up, as soon as that paper's posted, everyone rushes over to take a look. What happened? Who died? Who was it? The tradition of daily newspapers, of course, continued in various forms throughout history, eventually evolving into our modern day newspaper industry. Or now I just go, oh, what's on Twitter? This person died. Nice, that's sad. Number 6, electric light bulbs. This one here, yeah, it's a bit important, I guess. Without light bulbs, well, you wouldn't be able to see my pale Victorian era complexion right now. But now we got 1,000, so you can see every imperfection on my face. But thanks to Humphrey Davy, the world is a little brighter with electric light bulbs. Humphrey Davy was a British chemist, and he was famous, of course, for inventing the very first electric light in 1802. He created a battery-powered arc lamp, which consisted of 2 charcoal rods that were connected to a battery and then brought close together to produce this, well, light. This first ever electric arc that changed history. This arc produced a bright light that could be sustained for several hours, which today would suck, but back then, that's game-changing. Although Davy's electric light was not practical for widespread use yet due to its high cost and short lifespan, it was still a significant step towards lighting technology and where we are now in the future, and it paved the way for further research and development in this field. Again, pretty important. Davy's invention also had a profound impact on other areas, such as electrical power generation and distribution. So now we have clap on, clap off lights. That's crazy. If you could only see that was his dream. He wanted an electric arc and then he wanted to clap it off. He's like, yes, I've done it. Number 5, transistors. The invention of the transistor in 1947, we don't talk about it enough. This was a major breakthrough in the field of electronics. The transistor is a semiconductor device that can amplify and switch electronic signals, and this of course paved the way for the development of modern electronics, including computers, televisions, radios, this thing that I'm talking to you on, all of that good stuff. The invention of the transistor was made by a team of scientists at Bell Laboratories, led by William Shockley. William Shockley, he's like, oh, trust me, I have to do this profession. The first transistor was made using germanium, and it was much smaller and much more efficient than the vacuum tubes that were used at the time. Yeah, believe it or not, this was a step in the right direction. This was the future. I'm looking up research about transistors while using a computer. What a weird era we're in right now. It was a weird time. Number 4, the Parthian Empire battery. The Parthian battery is an ancient artifact discovered in modern day Iraq. This battery dates back to the 1st century BCE. Yeah, year 1, uno, just 1. Happy New Year. It's been one of them. The battery itself is a clay jar containing a copper cylinder that surrounds a big iron rod. Looks quite unsafe, if I'm being honest. I don't know. If I saw that on the subway, I'd probably not get on. A little sketchy. The jar also contains an asphalt stopper and an electrolyte solution, and it's believed to have been made of vinegar or wine. So that was their power back then. Although the purpose of the battery is not entirely clear, it's speculated that it may have been used for electroplating or, check this out, or for medical purposes. Yeah, medical purposes. Imagine being brought back to life thousands of years ago, and there's a guy holding this waiting in front of you. That's jarring. You're like, did I die? Am I back? What is that? What are you holding? The Parthian Empire battery is proof that we didn't need aliens back then to do stuff, right? Humans were more advanced than we think. Specifically, humans from ancient civilizations. They somehow figured this out. They had knowledge of electricity and electrochemistry in the year 1 AD. That's crazy. This invention challenges the commonly held belief that modern science and technology are recent developments. It's like, no, they had some shit back then for sure. Number 3, vaccines. Plagues aren't new. Random diseases that can sweep an entire country. We've seen this play out many times in history. The Black Death killed 75 to 200 million people in the 14th century. The Spanish flu in 1918, it killed 1/3 of the world's population, 50 million lives. The cholera pandemic began in 1817, and in 2010, there was another outbreak in Haiti. Couldn't get worse. Vaccines are a little important. Yeah, they go back to the 17th century when English physician Edward Jenner developed a method to protect against smallpox. Now, this was performed by injecting people with cowpox. which was a less severe disease. The practice of vaccination gradually spread throughout Europe, and by the 19th century, thankfully, vaccines were being developed for a range of diseases, including polio, measles, and tetanus. Those three things you really don't want at any point in your life. Vaccines have played a crucial role in preventing infectious diseases and have saved countless lives. However, there's also been a controversy surrounding their use, particularly in recent years with the rise of anti-vaccine movements. Yeah, a lot of people with Sharpies and time today. You didn't have that back in the dark ages. Bristol board wasn't a thing back then. You know? Number 2, ancient telescope. Yes, let's see some stuff. Let's see the past. The Nimrod lens. This is a 3,000-year-old rock crystal lens that was discovered, again, in modern-day Iraq. It was discovered in the mid-1800s. Just an ancient relic. Just an ancient telescope, fresh out of Zelda. There we go. Today we have the James Webb Space Telescope, but 3,000 years ago, they were more advanced than we thought. The lens is believed to have been made by a Syrian craftsman sometime around 750 BC, and it's the oldest known example of a magnifying lens. Up until then, everybody was squinting a lot, kind of like how I do with the prompter sometimes. You'll see, I'm like, ooh. The lens is quite small in size. It's about 3 centimeters in diameter, not much, and its focal length was only 12 centimeters. Again, it's no James Webb, but back then, thousands of years ago, it was something. Now, the exact purpose of the Nimrod lens is still up for debate, but it's thought to have been used for decorative or ceremonial purposes, or possibly as a magnifying glass for studying small objects. The Nimrod lens is the first example of ancient optical technology. So small. He's like, yes. The moon. Number 1, the printing press. Look, I'm no fan of homework, okay? But I get it. It's important. You gotta do it. The printing press, this is a revolutionary invention, and it was invented during the medieval period, and it allowed for the mass production of books and or pamphlets. Yeah, pamphlets were huge back in medieval times. They loved folding. Invented by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century, the printing press could now reproduce text more quickly, and it was pretty cheap considering what came before. You had to hire a guy just to rewrite everything. That's gonna take ages. And it did. Took quite a few fortnights. The printing press had quite the impact on society. It enabled wider access to knowledge, the spread of ideas, and it contributed to the growth of literacy, which I guess I could use a little bit of today. That's great. The printing press played a key role in the Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation, and it may or may not have helped lay the foundation for the modern world, and I think it's probably the most important.
Number 10. Steel cage match, brother. Okay, so it's the early 1900s and you're living in a rapidly growing city. Towers are popping up everywhere, and that means that there's less space for you and your baby to play in. Only if there was a way my baby could get fresh air and sunshine. Meet the baby cage. Yeah, a small metal cage with a tiny mattress for your baby. The said metal cage is suspended on your windowsill, making the baby suspend multiple stories above ground level. This is just a great idea. The idea behind this terrible idea was that the babies need fresh air and sunshine. Providing them with such was thought to improve their immune system and make them healthier. Besides the fact that the only thing separating your baby from becoming the worst rainfall event of the month was a thin metal cage. This is a prime example of why every product should be thoroughly tested and thought about before selling. Eventually, these did fall out of fashion, but in reality this wasn't that long ago, which is kind of crazy to think about. Number 9. Nuclear time. A lot happened in the 1900s. I mean, a lot. Couple wars here and there, the TV, the car. It was a busy century. A century full of discovery and invention. One such unusual invention was the radium dial, watches and clocks that were painted with luminescent paint, making the numbers and dials glow in the dark. Trouble with this new invention was the paint being used wasn't exactly safe, as it was made from radium. For the Breaking Bad nerds at home, radium is a highly radioactive element, even more so than the legendary uranium. So when a factory of women eager to get to work were told they were going to be painting watches with radioactive paint, do you think anyone asked for PPE? Truth be told, not everything was known about radium as it was only recently discovered, but what's so unusual is what factories told these women how to paint the watches. In order to give the brushes a fine tip, the women were instructed to use their lips to keep the brushes in perfect order, not knowing that day after day they were ingesting a very radioactive element. And in some sense of dark comedy, they sometimes had fun and painted their nails and on each other. I mean, it glowed in the dark, it was glow in the dark paint, it was new, it was cool. Over 50 women would become very sick from painting, and 12 sadly lost their lives. Number 8. I'm ready for my close-up. Ladies, this one's for you. In this day and age with social media, loving your self-image can be tough. There's tons of things that makeup companies and media do to make you want to be the people they want you to be. If you buy said product, of course. Well, I'm here to tell you that you don't need all that. You're gorgeous just the way you are, and lately, honey, you've been slaying it. However, this marketing manipulation isn't new, and in the past, most certainly wasn't very subtle. Introducing the Beauty Micrometer, the latest from How to Horrify People Daily. It was actually invented by the famed beautician Max Factor Sr. Hell of a name. This steel cagey device was placed over a poor woman's head, to then mathematically calculate the flaws that would be adjusted using makeup products. Obviously, these are no longer around, and for good reason. I don't even have a joke for that one. That's just weird.
The toy that could get us all out of absences at school, Talk Boy, is number 7, the perfect symbol of 90s tech. Clunky, obsolete, tied to a beloved 90s franchise, and featuring a payoff that, for the time, was an amazing novelty. It was seriously just a video cassette in a little player upon which you could record and play back your own voice or somebody else's. No part of that setup is still relevant whatsoever. The audio recorder only had 2 features. Speeding and slowing down recorded vocals. But that was good enough to pull off a few unbelievable pranks, pretend to be your parents on the phone, or mess with some bullies, as was shown to us all by Kevin McAllister in Home Alone 2. The second this chunky device was used in the hit franchise, it had kids everywhere clamoring to have one. And lest we forget, the Talk Boy also had a cooler, sleeker cousin, the Yak Back, which could only record a few seconds of sound and play it forward or backwards like an auditory Vine or TikTok of 90s audio toys. Number 6, annoying but efficient, beepers. Also called pagers, these devices were fantastic for reaching someone right away. How they worked was a call or email is forwarded to the pager, a message comes in with a number to call. Although hardly used anymore, pagers remain one of the most reliable forms of communication available, and are still widely used by doctors, as there's no delay in delivery, no network overload, and no dead zones. They had to be reachable at all times, but only in an archaic, indirect way. Someone pages you, and then you have to go find a telephone and call them back. You also definitely kept a list of all the codes you needed to understand in the messages you received in your back pocket. That's why when you've watched medical dramas, there's always that scene of a doctor being paged, checking the mini radio frequency device, and then suddenly running away. If someone had a pager, they were usually important or needed it for work, but most people had them by the late 90s. People used to say beep me, and it was a really cool thing. Meanwhile, today's grade schoolers are walking around with fully functioning iPhones like they're expecting a call from Rihanna at any second. Clear Craze was a nightmarish 90s product fad that brought up number 5, Crystal Pepsi. This soft drink was made by PepsiCo and initially released in Canada and the United States from 1992 to 1994. As a result of the 1980s to 90s clear craze, as I mentioned, this craze started because the idea of a clear product was a pure product. As we know, this is 100% not true, but Crystal Pepsi was one of the many clear and colorless products released by manufacturers such as Soapsoft, Miller Brewing Company, Palmolive, and more. In Crystal Pepsi's first year, it captured 1 full percentage point of US soft drink sales, or approximately 474 million, the equivalent to 889 million in 2021. By late 1993, the manufacturer discontinued the beverage. In 2013, a video of Kevin Strahl drinking a vintage 90s bottle of Crystal Pepsi went viral. This video alone sparked tens of thousands of petition signatures to bring the drink back. Even billboards were erected to demand for it. This interest from this campaign led to an official response to Strahl by PepsiCo on June 8th of 2015, commenting on the YouTuber and his fans' commitment and enthusiasm with the teaser of the drink's return. And so in mid-2016, Crystal Pepsi was released across the United States and Canada, promoted with a retro-style website and marketing video. The funny thing is, it tastes like normal Pepsi. You may not remember the item, but your ankles will. Number 4, the Skip It. Whew, my shins hurt just thinking about it. During its initial release in the 1980s, the Skip It toy became a commercial success through its advertisements on daytime TV such as Nickelodeon and Boomerang, as well as other children's programming. It was based off of the toy of the exact same concept, the Lemon Twist from the 1960s. A Skip It is a weighted plastic ball that ties around the ankle. A stretch of cord in between your ankle and the ball is skipped over as you swing the weighted ball around 360 in a circle. Oh yeah, those suckers could whip back at any second and give you a bruise that even a Razor scooter could be envious of giving. Sometimes they were super fancy, making noise, having cool designs, or flashing lights, things of that nature, for the cool kids of 4th grade. Time magazine magazine included it in their 100 greatest toys ever, and it's actually still available for purchase today, but considerably less common and less popular. The equivalent of psychedelic for a preteen was Lisa Frank items. Number 3. Girls growing up in the 90s had access to what may be history's most vibrant and eclectic eras of fashion and baubles. Baby Fat, the Delia's catalog, Wet Seal low-rise jeans, and of course, Lisa Frank. Their endless products included everything from stickers and 3-ring binders to jewelry and clothing. All featured the iconic brand signature aesthetic of cute cuddly animals in bright colors and patterns amidst black color blocking. Lisa Frank herself was only 24 when she incorporated her name into a franchise, and it's in the same year that she received its first $1 million order from Spencer's Gifts, aka she was a smash success from day one. Lisa Frank's popularity took a dip with the rise of digital era. The company receded into smaller collaborations and was mostly underground, but strongly resurged in the 2010s. Since there's been brand collabs with Crocs, Urban Outfitters, BlendJet, Morph Makeup, and even Pillsbury sugar cookies. If you've managed to hold on to some of your Lisa Frank items from childhood, you'd be surprised to know that some of them have gone up in value and are worth a pretty penny now. Number 2 is a trip to orbit and the bathroom, because this can't have been good for your stomach. This is for my Canadians. The 90s was a creative era for many things, especially beverages. Companies explored unforeseen parameters of flavor and aesthetics, and so we see the Orbit soda not soda beverage thing. It was a Canadian beverage and it was short-lived, both coming out and being discontinued in the same year of 1997. It's a clear drink, clear craze things, that's chock full of sugar and had bright colored gelatin balls suspended and floating mysteriously. It was fruit flavored, but I'll be honest, these are the last flavors I expected to read when I was researching this product. Blackcurrant berry, blueberry, melon, strawberry, pineapple, banana, cherry, coconut, raspberry, citrus, and vanilla orange. That is intense. No wonder these drinks were short-lived because of their overwhelming flavor combinations and weird floating orbs. Lava lamps are fun to look at, but no one wants to drink one. But if you do, hit eBay. You can still find unsealed Orbit's drinks there, running you an average of $50 a bottle. And number 1 is the Windows Start Maze screensaver. Ah yes, the back rooms. Maybe this screensaver is why so many of us find a fascination with that concept. Anyways, if you had a desktop computer in or around the time of 1995 and 6, you're likely familiar with this endless maze screensaver. While the graphics may be painful to look at now, they were top-notch visual at the time, like a 4D roller coaster. The default setting for the maze is a textured with brick walls and a wood floor and its asbestos tile ceiling. Users can customize these textures, swapping them out for animated psychedelic patterns in later versions, or maybe create their own custom textures. The walls are lined with art, some random plants, and statues. The maze is randomly generated each time, with the player navigating it in first person, spawning in front of a floating start button. After starting, it automatically traverses using the right hand rule, which will guarantee the maze will eventually be solved because all randomly generated mazes are simply connected.
Number 10, fork scissors. I don't know, I mean, this seems like a pretty functional whatever it is, but the rise of suburban life and dinner party hosting clearly influenced this knife and fork combination tool. But in all honesty, there are cultures that actually use scissors to cut their meat to make it easier to have smaller bites, like in South Korea. But this tool looks pretty wild to look at, with one side being a fork and the other side being a knife. In some way, you can cut your meals and use the same utensil to pick it up, almost like a surgical tool, but as a function for eating meals. I can see how during a dinner party you want to show it off, especially to your in-laws, how advanced and cool you are. I kinda want it. Number 9, the pneumatic railway. Getting to something big here, and that would be the pneumatic railway. The era in general was a hotbed of invention around the world, especially in America and Europe, and for this invention it was to convey letters along tunnels in a large vacuum-driven wagon. It operated for just over 2 months and may have been a demonstration line for more substantial atmospheric railway planned between Waterloo and Whitehall, a construction of which started under the Thames but was actually never completed. It has also apparently been rumored that the site of the railway is haunted, a popular urban legend of the 1930s partially connected with stories surrounding Crystal Palace Railway Station. In 1978, a woman claimed to have found the tunnel to have been seen it, a old railway carriage filled with skeletons in Victorian outfits. Haunted or no, at least they tried to see if it would work, and I mean it didn't, but at least they tried. Number 8, the exploding organ. I don't know what the use of this invention was, but in some Phantom of the Opera imagery, George Eugene Frederick Kastner wanted the organ to be more dramatic, so he made the design an organ that blew out fire fire from its windpipes instead of, well, wind. I swear in The Simpsons they had an episode where someone was playing this exact organ. Or was it Family Guy? I don't know. But you know what would be funny? By some comedic effect, imagine they were going to show this invention off, but they didn't tell anyone the pipes were going to blast fire, so they thought, hey, you know what would be the best place to show off our new cool invention? In a church, during a funeral. So they would blast the organ during a very important part of the sermon, just to scare everyone. Again, this didn't happen, I'm just saying it would be funny if that happened. I have no idea why he wanted to have the pipes blast fire though, I think he was just bored. But according to his design notes and his patent, it is well known that if a flame of hydrogen gas be introduced within a glass or other tube, and if it is placed as to be capable of vibrating, there is a formed around this flame, as to say, upon the whole of its enveloping surfaces, and as atmosphere of hydrogen gas, which in uniting the oxygen in the air of tubes burns in small portions, each composed of 2 parts of hydrogen to 1 oxygen. The combustion of this mixture of gases produced a series of slight explosion or detonation. This is in his notes, explaining why this needs to exist.
Number 7. Ancient seismoscope. Zhanghang seismoscope is an ancient Chinese instrument that was used to detect and measure earthquakes. And it looked pretty badass. I'm not gonna lie, this thing looks pretty cool. It was invented by renowned scientist, mathematician, and astronomer Zhanghang. It was made during the Han Dynasty around 132 CE. The seismoscope consisted of a bronze vessel that rested on the back of a bronze dragon, with 8 open-mouthed toads positioned beneath it. Yeah, it's scientific, but it's also a beautiful instrument, right? Like I said, it's badass. So when an earthquake would happen, a mechanism inside the vessel would trigger the release of the ball from one of the toad's mouths, indicating the direction of the earthquake. He'd be like, "Wah," that way. And everyone would be like, okay, cool. Let's go this way then. Today it's a little different. Today it's fun. It's just graphs and charts. Looks like some avatar technology, whatever. No toads puking up any balls in any direction, so ergo boring. Number 6, the Baghdad battery. Also known as the Parthian battery. This is an ancient device that would go back to 248 BC. Why am I doing this? Am I Italian? Am I Steve Jobs? I'm walking around like, ah yes, I invented this. Look at my loose wrist here. Why do I gotta keep these down? Keep these at bay here. The battery consists of a clay jar, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod, all of which were found together in what is now modern day Iraq. It's believed that the device was used to generate an electric current by filling the jar with an acidic liquid like vinegar or wine. I sound like Bill Nye the Science Guy right now, but then they would insert copper and iron components after, and then they would make electricity. They would make, I don't know, here, Tony Stark would make this. I don't know, it's crazy. The purpose of the Baghdad battery is still unknown, which is fascinating. I won't be able to sleep at night now, but it's thought to have been used for electroplating or medicine or as a religious artifact. And today we're like, well, we have no idea. This is the stuff that I love. Old, ancient, like this sounds like something from Breath of the Wild that I would find. Number 5. Ancient Greek fire. Okay, this one's pretty epic. It's not, I mean, it's horrible. It's pretty rough history here, but definitely interesting nonetheless. Greek fire was used by the Eastern Roman Empire from the 7th to the 12th century. Now, the formula for Greek fire was a closely guarded secret, which is like so villainous, but it's believed to have contained petroleum, quicklime, and other combustible substances, all in one soup. Just a big hot mess. Something you don't want to drop, really, ideally. Greek fire was delivered using a flamethrower-like device on a boat called a siphon, and it was capable of igniting on water, making it a very reliable weapon against any ship out there. Yeah, they would shoot hot fire through a giant syringe at enemy ships. Ancient history is cool, it's impressive, but it's also, most of the time, brutal. It's disgusting. My God. Number 4, mechanical clocks. Look, we all love an hourglass, all right? I love an hourglass. Playing a board game with the family, you aggressively flip that thing down. No better feeling, right? Tick-tock, sands are swirling. But why don't we have an hourglass anymore? Why don't we use those? Those are pretty sweet. It's a pretty amazing invention. Let's talk about those for a bit. During the medieval period, the invention of mechanical clocks revolutionized timekeeping and replaced the use of hourglasses. One guy's like, what? I loved these though. That's me, I'm the guy. Mechanical clocks were first invented in Europe in the 13th century, and they were initially used in public spaces, like churches, town squares, stuff like that. These early clocks relied on the energy generated by falling weights to power their movements. Yeah, you're not gonna have one of these next to your bed. Not for a while, at least. Mechanical clocks allowed for more precise timekeeping and helped standardize time across different regions, but back then it was scary. Back then it was weights and big things bonging around above your head. It's like, what time is it? I don't know. The only one we got. Number 3. The blast furnace. This one was also quite important. All these are pretty important, but this one's, you know, wasn't used to destroy a human being, so it's good. The blast furnace. It's a medieval invention that revolutionized the production of iron, which is so key. We love that over here in Steamville with iron everywhere. I don't know, there's trains literally all around us. It was first introduced in Europe during the 14th century and it quickly became a game changer. The furnace's design allowed for higher temperatures and more efficient use of fuel, leading to increased iron production and, most importantly, lower costs, which, yeah, blacksmiths love this, you know, they hate this one trick. The blast furnace would also enable the production of higher quality iron that was suitable in wider ranges of applications, which again, we love that. We love when iron just stays in one spot. Usually it's how we like our iron. We made better, faster iron. I don't know, what a day. That sounds like a Daft Punk song. Harder, better, faster iron. This invention spread across Europe, of course, with many regions becoming iron production hot zones. A lot of blacksmiths in the area, a lot of beards. Single blacksmiths in your area. Just swipe, here we go. Number 2, the printing press. I'm not a fan of homework, but I get it. It's gotta be done sometime. The printing press, of course we have to include this. This was a revolutionary invention during, again, the medieval period that allowed for the mass production of books and pamphlets. I love pamphlets, thank God. Love me a good pamphlet. I love flipping things only thrice and then closing it. That's it. No more than 3. Invented by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century, the printing press could reproduce text more quickly, and again, it was pretty cheap considering what came before. You had to pay a guy to do everything. That's crazy. You gotta listen to him all day? No. You gotta feed him? No. This had quite the impact on society and enabled wider access to knowledge, the spread of ideas, and it contributed to the growth of literacy, which again, we love that. Still leading towards that one. The printing press played a key role in the Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation, and it may or may not have helped lay the foundation for the modern world. So I guess, yeah, we can put this close to number 1, I would say, or number 2 is pretty good. And finally, number 1, flutes. Yeah, we're ending on flutes, the best, right? We had to learn it for 3 years in school. Why? Couldn't tell you. No idea, we had to do it though. Music has been in the air for a very, very long time. Neanderthals enjoyed a flute every now and then. Who would have thunk? They weren't playing We Three Kings like us, you know, but they were making music as early as 50,000 years ago, which is just baffling. The first instrument known to man was most likely our vocal cords, but the second instrument were the flutes of Geistenkloster Cave. They're the oldest musical instruments ever that have ever been discovered, period. They were made from bird bone and the ivory of a mammoth. Yeah, if that's any indication how old they are, they made music out of mammoth ivory. Again, I still can't play the recorder. I never learned. I was useless. My fingers were too long. I'd always like slip off the holes. I got Jack Skellington fingers. I can't play a recorder. No way. Number 10, the Slugbot. Kind of recent, but we'll go back. We'll go back to the ancient days. The 2021 Slugbot is a robotic device that was created by researchers at the California Institute of Technology, and this robot is designed not to help you with your homework, but instead help farmers manage crops without harmful pesticides. Pretty good, right? No more helicopters dropping random sprays on you. It's always fun. The Slugbot uses artificial intelligence, a little scary, but here we go. Uses AI to detect and identify pests such as slugs, and it applies a targeted non-toxic solution to then, well, eliminate them. Little slug terminators going back in time to get rid of pests and problems. Love that. The device moves autonomously through the fields, navigating itself around plants and obstacles, and operates quietly to avoid disturbing wildlife. That's awesome. A quiet robotic slug is somewhere out there. Watch your step. Just, you know, be light on the toes. Number 9, the BitBite. The BitBite is it's technology designed to improve eating habits and promote a healthier lifestyle. Again, I'm not sure I'm going to use this one. I like just eating chips without any voice in my head telling me to stop. That's how I like them. Dill pickle? See you later. It's a small wearable device that clips onto your earlobe and it monitors eating behaviors in real time. It tracks the number of bites, the speed of your eating, and the duration of meals, providing instant feedback and coaching you right there in your earlobe to encourage mindful eating habits. So while you're eating, it'll be like, slow down. You're like, well, good call. Thank you, Siri. That's good. BitBite also integrates with a mobile app, of course, right? You gotta connect it all, which allows users to set personalized goals, track your progress, and receive personalized recommendations based on your eating patterns. You look down today, he's like, I think it's burger day. I think it's definitely a burger day. With its advanced sensors and AI algorithms, BitBite has the potential to revolutionize the way that we approach nutrition and healthy eating without it being, you know, boring and all charts and labels and stuff. Now it's just a voice, a literal voice in your ear telling you, don't eat that. No, you don't need sour keys today. Let it go. Number 8, ornithopter. This one's good. This one's from Dune. It's the thing that goes really loud in IMAX. It's so good. The ornithopter is very real and not as cool as in the movie Dune, but it was something. It was a type of aircraft that uses flapping wings to generate lift and propulsion. almost like a dragonfly. The concept of an ornithopter has been around since ancient times, but the first manned flight of a powered ornithopter was back in 1963. It's weird, I have a dragonfly tattoo that says 1963 on it. I'm like, yeah, I was there, I saw the whole thing, I was one of them. This historic flight was achieved by Dr. Paul McCready. He was an American engineer and inventor at the time. Now his ornithopter, God, I wish I had one now. His ornithopter, called the Gossamer Condor, this one had a wingspan of 96 feet and it was powered by pedaling a bicycle-like mechanism. You'd have to go quite fast if you wanted to get up there. Great for the legs, good leg day workout. The Gossamer Condor flew for a distance of 1,163 meters, reaching an altitude of 15 feet. That is amazing. The Wright bros are like, we can't beat that, but we'll try. We'll definitely try.
Number 7. Red dye number 2. My mom was not the best cook on planet Earth. That's just the truth. However, hold on, everyone jumps all over me. Her baking was out of this world. Cookies, banana bread, cupcakes, Yorkshire puddings. I had to stay quiet during that one. She said they'd never rise if I didn't be quiet. You name it, Mama Chetty, she made it great. She used all kinds of ingredients, except for anything with red dye number 2. She always said it wasn't good for me, partially because I was, well, a little tanky kid and hyper, but also because during the late 70s she was told that a certain red dye number 2 was extremely harmful. Some scientists believed it was carcinogenic. The red dye was in a lot of stuff, plus who can blame them with a mouth-watering name like red dye number 2? Oh, I want some just thinking about it. M&M's were so concerned with the rumor that they removed red from their palette of colors for a whole decade. Maybe mom was onto something. Number 6. Sega Genesis add-ons. While the Nintendo 64 disc drive was ridiculous, the Sega Genesis add-ons were 100% ludicrous and way worse in my opinion. Mainly with 2 key add-ons, the Sega CD, which saw more use than the Nintendo 64 disc drive, with such classics like Night Trap, which I'm not even sure what to classify that game as. It's a sleepover, and you got there's cameras, there's burglar. It's weird, I don't know. But besides that cult classic, there really isn't anything on there. There was also the 32X add-on that works with all your 16-bit Sega games, but also can enhance and has a select library of updated games for the 32X or 32-bit era. Sega was trying to keep the Genesis alive, and with those sales, you can't blame them. Sonic sells, baby. However, without a total support of these add-ons, lack of games, and being sold separately, it just wasn't as popular as, well, the regular Genesis or as Sega would hope it to be. Also, not to mention, each add-on had to be separately powered, so that's 3 AC adapters you gotta plug in just to play on the couch with friends. Too much, dude. Too much. Number 5. The Go-Go Pillow. Okay, here's the scenario. You just sit down after a long day of work or school. You start flipping through TV stations, and then you see an infomercial with a dad sitting down on his couch after a long day, and he's trying to use his iPad, but it's out of his baby boomer capacity. That happens with technology sometimes. My mom, she needs help. So then a happy narrator introduces the Go-Go Pillow, the comfy pillow that helps you relax with your iPad. It has like 4 extra flaps of fabric to hold dad's iPad in. It holds it in place so that he can watch History Channel in peace. I would just like to argue that any pillow with extra flaps can achieve this. You don't really need this pillow, really anything can hold it in place. This or anything with small grooves, it's all you need to hold your iPad. Also, you know, your hands, your arms. I mean, I'm lazy, but even I can still use that. Come on, Dad, stop, come on. Number 4, Zoomies. The powered glasses that act like binoculars, perfect for bird watchers, hunters, concert goers that are stuck in the nosebleeds, grandma doing her needlework, or grandpa when he can't see the TV. Even though I swear old people can see, it's more of a hearing issue. Every old person I know, it's more, what did you say there, boy? A silly looking pair of glasses that promises enhanced vision, and in reality, well, they were just thick black glasses that not only looked ugly, but also according to user reviews, don't really work that well. And when the enhanced zoom feature is being used, the image is blurry, almost like as seen on TV products only work on TV and don't do what they say on the box at home. Number 3, the better marriage blanket. We've all been there. It's late at night, husband and wife are getting ready for bed. That's when the man of the house in all his handsomeness rolls over and lets one rip with a thunderous cheek clapping wind. Gross, dude. Not like I'd ever do that, right, Chris? Not only did he just ruin the feng shui of the nightly reading, but he also let the stench in the sheets. Ugh, gross. Well, not anymore. With the better marriage blanket that claims it's made with the military technology to help sift out a husband's, well, barbecue beer flatulence. As much as wives, girlfriends everywhere would be throwing money at a product like that, it doesn't really work that way. The truth of the matter is, Some men, husbands and fathers have superpowers, and no bedsheet ordered with a bad credit card is going to fix that. Number 2. ShamWow. Does this really need an introduction? In the late 2000s, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing Vince the ShamWow guy, earning fame as the orange rag that cleans up all messes at car and boat shows. Eventually, it earned a commercial that seemed to play non-stop, or at least from my memory it did. A towel that can seemingly clean up any mess, water, juice, cola, wine, and grab it right through the carpet with a simple pat. It's very simple, very beautiful. One for the house, one for the RV, and one for the boat, said middle class America. Too bad it wasn't enough to clean up the legal mess that Vince the ShamWow guy got himself into. Uh-oh, where's the OxyClean when you need it? And finally, in our number 1 spot, sauna pants. Lastly today, we have the sauna pants, the latest in weight loss technology that doesn't work. Oh, what? Your grandma probably had a belt sander version of this that would basically just strap around you and vibrate the person all over to lose weight. But despite all that vigorous shaking, she was still the same at bingo night. What? I know, right? Crazy. Well, the sauna pants boast the same thing. You sit back, relax, and let the sweat do the work. A ridiculous looking pair of pants that has to be plugged in. Sizes don't fit all, which is kind of silly. If people are trying to lose weight, you'd think there would be bigger sizes. Not that I want a pair or anything. And of course, it just doesn't work. Unless you were trying to make a very interesting stain in the couch, then that would work, absolutely.
Kicking off the list at number 10, burials. This list is full of interesting objects that Neanderthals created, like tools or weapons, that kind of stuff. But the idea of burying your loved one after they've passed on, well, that had to start somewhere, didn't it? Ancient Egyptians arguably did it the best. The rich were buried with their treasure and goods because they believed that death on our world was just the start. There was another life afterwards, and they would take their treasure and good stuff with them. Bye. Not leaving anything for you, I'm taking all this with me. Neanderthals didn't figure out how to build tombs yet or how to rule for decades. Studies done in Western Europe suggest that Neanderthals would sometimes bury their dead and leave flowers. Flowers or a grave marker of some sort. Pollen was found in northern Iraq's Shandir caves. Shandir cave is a staple when it comes to Neanderthal history, and the fact that flowers were found in the middle of a cave system, some humans and emotions are definitely at play here. This was symbolic thinking. The weather didn't make it easy to collect flowers as well. Loved ones passing during an ice age? Yeah, I'll never complain about an outdoor funeral again. Number 9, glass. Imagine making glass for the first time. You would have thought you were a wizard for sure. I watch glass blowing shows now and it looks like wizardry. Wizardry in 4K. Glass blowing is nuts. They're just like, and it's just like a vase all of a sudden. You're like, how did he do that? That's so hot. Glass that was naturally occurring, like obsidian for example, that was around and used during the Stone Age. Man-made glass was first used around 6,000 years ago. Man-made glass, yeah, let's talk about it. Archaeologists are pinning Lebanon, North Syria, and ancient Egypt as the birthplace of synthetic glass. The first use of man-made glass were beads, believe it or not. Imagine being the first person to rock beads. The confidence. Mid-2000 BC, guy decides to glaze up some beads. What an icon. Now we get to do this. The beads, it's a cool door. Number 8, sharpened stones. Some of the oldest tools in history could be laying in front of you and you would have zero idea. You'd have no clue. Coming from the shores of Lake Turkana in Kenya, these stone tools date back to around 3 million years ago. Yeah, these are predating the tools before that I mentioned by like 700,000 years. They seem to predate humans in the Homo genus as well, so that's interesting, that's kind of concerning. The volcanic ash and minerals around these sharpened stones date back that far, millions of years old. Stones in history can get a little dirty, to say the least. Not all these ideas that involve stones or sharpened stones are the best. French anthropologist Philippe Charlier shared toilet hygiene history in the British Medical Journal. Perhaps one of the most intriguing parts explains how these flat terracotta discs were found in ancient Greek sites and they had residue on them. They had a certain residue on these sharp rocks. They used to with these stones, yeah. They also discovered a Greek cup which said 3 stones are enough to wipe one's arse. 3? I don't know, that's at least 5, my friend. Greeks would use stones to wipe. Never take the go for granted ever again.
Number 7, the baby cage. Living in large cities can be difficult. Toronto being the 3rd largest in North America, well, I can relate. It's crazy we're that big. Things get busy even in the suburbs here. There's a hustle and a bustle that small cities and towns just don't get. Now, back in the early 20th century, this was still the case, except there wasn't the same emphasis on park life, biking, and enjoying what fresh air actually is in the city like there is in modern cities today. We've done better since then. And there's nothing more important than fresh air for babies. So that's why in the 1920s, the baby cage was invented. Limited. Basically, it was a wire cage that hangs out of your 5th floor apartment window, like that massive AC unit that hasn't worked properly since McDonald's ran out of Szechuan sauce. Obviously, I don't need to tell you why this is a bad idea, and not too long after, it was outlawed. It's just that's high up, it could drop, yeah, no, bad idea, not a good idea. Number 6, this one's for the older crowd, the Ford Pinto. Remember those bad boys? I never had the pleasure of being in one or owning one myself, but I swear to God, every time my family got together, the men would sit around and talk about cars that they own. It's kind of a man thing to do, I guess, even though they all had the same conversation the last time, which is just like only a couple months ago. And one model that always comes up is the Ford Pinto. Today, cars get recalled all the time, but in the age of affordable family vehicles and quality, the Ford Pinto stood out, especially because there was a chance the Pinto could burst into flames, which is arguably the worst thing a car could do. Besides not work. I'd argue not working is better than bursting into flames. A few other major issues really set back what I think is a very sleek and appealing vehicle to both mom and dad and the family. Number 5, the spaghetti fork. Ma, make sure you put my special spaghetti fork on the table. I need to eat my pasta and gabagool. Italians and lovers of the best cuisine on earth, in my opinion, I love Italian cuisine, get ready to cringe. The twirling spaghetti fork is a battery operated fork that twirls when you push a button, so you no longer suffer the burden of twirling your own spaghetti. Listen, I'm a big dude, I'm lazy, I love staying in after a long week of work and playing video games, probably my favorite thing to do. Yeah, sometimes I order in because I don't feel like getting up, but not twirling mom's spaghetti? Come on, twirling the spaghetti, I argue that's the best part. No dinner with no should require AA batteries in my opinion, I'm just saying. You bring a fork, why you bring us a fork? Number 4, hydrogen blimps. It really must have been something to witness humans gaining flight. Something so previously impossible was now not only possible, but something that you had to pay money for, which is how you know it was very successful. Large jumbo jets full of croc-wearing tours headed to Slav attractions was still a thing of the future. We're not there yet. This is still the early 1900s, we'll get there. So how do we get people to places in large numbers and still manage to be opulent? Said a bunch of people in the early 1900s. Airships, said Germany, who took the blimp game to the next level. However, a lot of these blimps made a cut in their design, if you will. To help save on money, the airships were filled with the much more cheaper hydrogen, which in large quantities is extremely volatile. The Hindenburg is a great example. Well, we could fill it with a safe fuel, but it's really expensive, but we could fill it with the fuel that could destroy the whole thing, and that's like 10 times cheaper. Well, I'll fill it with that then, why would you not? Number 3, flying car. Maybe it's because we love the idea of breaking new ground, setting precedents, or we really just want to live with the Jetsons. It was a cool cartoon. The Mizar flying car was designed by a group of engineers in the early 1970s, using the very famous Ford Pinto, like previously mentioned, because, well, it sucks on the ground, so it's gotta be good in the sky, right? Right, that makes sense. Well, no. Besides the mechanical issues, it would be a hard sell as, well, you know, the average American doesn't have flying experience, or not to mention a runway in their backyard. Plus, we have trouble with drones today. Imagine if it was raining Ford Pintos. Yikes. Mom, there's another Ford Pinto in the living room! It wouldn't go very well, would it? No. Number 2, the pet rock. This one's so stupid. It's just a rock. Legit, that's all it is. A fad about buying a rock and naming it. Oftentimes including those little googly eyes to make you believe it's alive, because yeah, okay. It's a ridiculous invention, it has no use. However, what it actually is a lesson in great marketing. Something weird enough that can be marketed quite easily, sold at an affordable price, and something that is already familiar with the people everywhere. So it actually makes sense, even if it is a bad invention. And number 1, this one, it's just so true, the Segway. About 15 years ago, these bad boys were all the rage. Basically, it's an electric scooter on 2 wheels with a handle to lean forward and lean back, or perhaps reverse. While there was some success in malls and airports, there wasn't that many in public. The main reason? Well, it's no different than a scooter or a bike, really, and well, it kind of feels like an attempt to reinvent the wheel when we don't need it. Also, in 2022, how many people do you know that have a Segway? Seriously. And if someone pulled up in a Segway to your hangout, it'd be kind of weird, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would. Yeah. Number 10, Nintendo 64 Disk Drive. For youths everywhere in the 90s, nothing really compared to the Nintendo 64. Sure, Sega was trying and Sony's brand new PlayStation was making waves in the video game market. And it had great games too, but pound for pound, the Nintendo 64 had it all. Amazing single player games and multiplayer that literally paved the way forward for other games of the future. I mean, just listen to these games. Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Super Smash Bros., Star Wars Rogue Squadron, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Banjo-Kazooie, Mario Kart 64, Mario Party, WWF No Mercy. That one's one of my favorites, brother. I mean, that is just a few of the games to mention. It truly was an amazing console, and for the first try at 3D, very, very impressive. Well, how could it be on this list then if it was so great, Chetty, you're probably saying to yourself? Well, in case you didn't know, in the late 90s, well, it was changing times and CD-ROMs were all the rage. This is why in secret Nintendo was developing an attachment for the Nintendo 64 that would play disc games. However, after a troubled development and skeptical sales, it was only released in Japan, like a lot of good things. This was not one of them, where it sold poorly as only 9 games were ever made for it, making one of the most beloved consoles of all time. Well, it left it with an ugly blemish on its legacy. Number 9, Aquanauts. It sounds strange, but a lot of good ideas come from the shower. Maybe it's the isolation, maybe it's the smell of Irish Spring, or a hot shower on a cold winter's day. Oh, it's one of my favorites. But for some strange reason, a lot of people's best ideas come to you in the shower. Who would have thought? For me, it's jokes. As a comedian, I'm always thinking about stuff like that, and I swear I've come up with some real gems in the shower. It's too bad though that when I get out of the shower, I forget. Too bad when I get out of the shower, I forgot. Oh man. Well, clearly I need the Aquanauts, a waterproof notepad so I can write down my thoughts and thinks without my Blue's Clues notepad getting waterlogged. Sounds great, right? Okay, sure, I guess it's helpful, but if I was using someone's shower and they had a notepad in their shower, well, it would be strange. Hey, sorry whoever uses this next. Shave my back hair and clog the drain. Sorry, XOXO. It's just a weird invention. It's not good. Number 8, new Coca-Cola. To me, there's nothing better than sitting in the hot summer sun, slathered in sunscreen, in my Muskoka chair because I'm a Canadian, and beside me is an ice cold Coke. I love beer, but there's just something about it I love. Cheers, Coca-Cola fans. How are you doing? I'm doing great. Now, I like the original recipe the most. However, cherry and vanilla are great. I'm just a vanilla guy. During the 1980s, Coke made a bold decision and released a new Coke formula. It was a bold decade, so, had to make moves. In 1985, the new formula made it past testers, but when it reached the public, there was literal public outcry to bring back the old stuff. The good stuff. Only a few short months later, shelves are restocked with classic Coke, bringing back the old formula, which may have also been a genius marketing technique.
Number 7, axes. The Neolithic period, also referred to as the New Stone Age, introduced us to many vital tools that we still use today. Like an axe, for example. Around 10,000 BC, Neanderthals moved from being these small hunter-gatherer type groups to these much larger settlements. In order to do so, you had to clear a lot of land. Humans evolved at this point in history because that's when we went from flaking stones to grinding them down entirely. We put a little more elbow grease in order to clear those trees out, to build a settlement or 2 or 3 or 5. Neolithic axes were found at sites in England and Denmark. This one here was found in great condition, alarmingly great condition. Like, look at this thing. It was uncovered during archaeological surveys for a tunnel project in Denmark. Imagine finding a 5,500-year-old axe in the middle of your shift. And in case you're wondering, the lack of oxygen in the surrounding clay is the reason why the wooden handle was preserved so well. It almost seems like it was placed there as some type of offering. My first thought is that it's for sure belonging to the Odin-Thor family. I don't know. It's placed downwards, you know what I mean? No one touch it. Number 6, spears and arrows. Perhaps one of the most vital inventions, one we for sure still use today, always, of course. Arrows and spears were a necessity when it came to hunting, and for people in the Stone Age, all they needed really was wood. They would carve a leaf shape at the end or a triangle at the tip, and then they were mainly used by riders or barefoot hunters. But when it came to hunting, you didn't want to get too close to your prey, or else the wrong team could be claiming victory and eat the other for lunch. You get what I'm saying? So their solution was to huck these spears instead, or make really tiny ones that you can throw, or shoot. The oldest bows in history are from 9000 BC. They're the home guard bows. They're found in Northern Europe all the way back from the Mesolithic period. The oldest spears, however, they come from Germany around 400,000 years ago, and they're actually the oldest wooden artifacts ever in history. Imagine being the first person to make a spear. Forget iPhones, a spear? That's a big deal. Number 5, flutes. We love a solid flutist. They're flutists, right? Flutist? Dude, I've always wanted to play the flute. Pied Piper, that guy is daring, that guy is wild. He runs around town and plays the jazz flute all day long in tights. Of course I want to be like that. Mostly, he's got some flaws. But who was the first person to bust out We Three Kings? Who do we have to blame for all those horrible recorder classes in elementary school? Always the one kid next to you, you're like, drain the spit, it's not on properly. Use that pinky, cover your thing up. The first instrument known to man was most likely our vocal cords, but the second instrument were the flutes of Glycine Coastral Cave. They're the oldest musical instruments that have ever been discovered. They were made from bird bone and the ivory of a mammoth. Yeah, so that's an indication how old they are. They made music out of mammoth ivory. That's old. Brass? Like, no, we haven't found that yet. Number 4, paintings. Yeah, why not? Let's include art into this mix. Who was the first person to create art? The Lascaux Caves have been dubbed the prehistoric Sistine Chapel. These cave paintings are from 17,000 years ago and they're beautiful. But if you're thinking about sneaking down there to write Jordan was here, well, you better think again. The cave was opened originally in 1948, but due to carbon dioxide levels and sweat from visitors and just people breathing and being around, it was closed in 1963. You can't be breathing on our prehistoric paintings. Get your morning dad breath out of here, sir. We don't want that. Look how beautiful it is. It's really nice. Learning about our history is challenging, but it's slowly fading away. We're breathing on it all day long. But these caves in France are not home to the oldest paintings in the world, believe it or not. Altamira Cave in Spain houses cave paintings from 35,000 years ago. The paintings were in such great condition that at first scientists doubted that they were the real deal from that long ago. But in 1902 they were marked as the real deal. These ochre and charcoal images are the most well preserved on the planet. Meanwhile, I'm over here still drawing the sun in the corner of my page. Number 3, blades. Around 80,000 years ago, the first ever 5 o'clock shadow appeared. And it wasn't my family, we don't have those. An upper Paleolithic stone tool tradition came from Neanderthals and also the first modern human. It's a big deal. This method here was to shave up your face so you're not, eating your own mustache for dinner, and it was entirely new to the game. During this process, Neanderthals would often break off these sharp flakes from the core of a large stone and then use those chips as blades. Horrible, just imagining that. The Aurignacian culture, appropriately named after the French village of Aurignac, where Neanderthal remains were found back in 1860, this culture is the first modern human in Europe. Looking back to around 100,000 years ago, we had to use seashells. And when I say seashells to get rid of hair, I don't mean they would, glide across the skin or anything like that. They would use 2 shells, then use them together as tweezers. Yeah, 1 by 1. Seashells, can you imagine? That's horrible. Can you hear that? That's the sound of our ancestors plucking their unibrow. Sounds painful, right? Ah, yes, it was. Sharpened clamshells were later used in the 19th century because we realized that they're flat enough we could probably just swipe off the hair. It saved a lot of time. Still horrible, but we saved a lot of time. We figured it out. Number 2, the wheel. One of the greatest inventions of all time, and now all we want is hover cars. How disrespectful, we just got this thing. The wheel, the idea of the wheel is unlike any other. See, most inventors are inspired by nature. Planes, submarines, bullet trains, all has something to do with nature, bird beaks, flying, underwater, all that crap. Nothing in nature resembles a wheel at all. The closest thing really are tumbleweeds and dung beetles. My favorite thing to mention on this channel. The poop rollers. Potter wheels were found from Mesopotamia around 5,500 years ago. Now it's hard to pinpoint who used the wheel first and where, given the fact that it was that long ago, but the front runners so far, aside from Mesopotamia, are the Tripoli people of modern Ukraine, because the word wheel literally is derived from their language, but the wheelbarrow may have appeared in ancient Greece around 600 BCE. They say you can't reinvent the wheel, but I feel like you can. At least this early in time, I feel like we did. Number 1, fire. Of course. Next to the wheel, this one was, it's pretty important, I'd say. When was fire first used in history? Well, a study done in 2011 was published in the Proceedings of National Academy of Science, and it showed that Neanderthals were firebenders. Not really, no. They were just, after carefully examining over 140 fireplace sites in Europe, the University of Colorado Boulder found some stone artifacts and charcoal dating back to 400,000 years ago. Now, of course, these fireplaces were used to cook meals, but at the same time, tools were created during this process. Melting things and moving them around, kind of like glass blowing, heat makes things come to life. Neanderthals would use something called pitch. Pitch was made by burning the bark of birch trees. It allowed them to attach stones to wooden shafts, which is a pretty big deal when it came to hammers and tools. Inventing glue is one thing, but doing it while you're working the barbecue? Whose dad was that? That's impressive. That's so impressive. Guys making tools while making lunch. Number 10, ancient telescope. The Nimrod lens. It's a 3,000-year-old rock crystal lens discovered in modern-day Iraq in the mid-1800s. Now, it was discovered quite recently, but back then, this thing was like ancient technology. Today we have the James Webb Space Telescope. 3,000 years ago, they were more advanced than we think. The lens is believed to have been made by a Syrian craftsman sometime around 750 BC. It's the oldest known example right now of a magnifying lens, which is sounds kind of nerdy, but that's cool. That's kind of one of those facts that makes me go, oh, interesting, I like that. Up until then, everybody was just squinting a lot, really. We didn't have anything to zoom in on. The lens is quite small in size. It's no James Webb, that's for sure. It's around 3 centimeters in diameter and a focal length of 12 centimeters. So again, not James Webb, but it was something, right? It was anything. The exact purpose of the Nimrod lens is still up for debate. That's still unknown, but it's thought to have been used for decorative or ceremonial purposes, or possibly, hopefully, magnifying things to study small objects, because that's science right there, it's technology. The Nimrod lens is the first example of ancient optical technology. That's cool, imagine building that, that's crazy. Number 9, the iron pillar. Remember when monoliths started to appear all around the world? We were all talking about it for like a month and then we just stopped. What happened with that? That's concerning. This next one rings a similar bell. The Iron Pillar of Delhi. It's a 7.3 meter tall iron column and it's located in the Qutb complex in Delhi, India. Now it went up sometime during the Gupta period, so sometime around the 3rd and 4th century AD, and it's been standing for over 1600 years without rusting or corroding at all, which is impressive. That and like the Egyptian pyramids, we have no idea how this happened. The column is notable for its high quality iron compositions and advanced forging techniques used to create it. We still can't figure out just how that was done, considering how long ago it was made. The Iron Pillar is also covered in several inscriptions in the Sanskrit language, which is pretty exciting, providing valuable ancient history about the Gupta Empire, and also, again, in remarkable condition, which is super rare. The pillar attracts visitors from all over the world. Want to go see a pillar? I kind of want to go see a pillar now. That'd be a crazy trip. Number 8, the Antikythera mechanism. Computers today, we can fit them in our pockets, but ancient Greek analog computers, apparently you can also fit those in your pockets. Who knew? The Antikythera mechanism was used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses for calendrical and astrological purposes. That sounds scientific, wow. It was discovered in 1901 in the Antikythera shipwreck, hence its name, and it's estimated to have been built around 150 and 100 BC. Now the mechanism consists of at least 30 bronze gears, and it was operated by turning a crank. This is, again, like ancient technology. This is amazing. It's rusty and full of barnacles now, but back then in its prime, this mechanism would accurately display the positions of the sun, the moon, and planets on specific dates, as well as predict solar and lunar eclipses. Some guy in the back's like, spoilers, it's tomorrow. Told you. The mechanism is considered a remarkable technological achievement for its time and provides valuable insights into the history of ancient Greek astronomy and technology, all in one rusty box right there. Think of what we haven't found yet, you know what I mean? I'm nervous. I'm so nervous. Humans are quite advanced.
Number 7, Cotton Eye Joe. Dear YouTube gods, I am sorry that history is full of not so cool things, but here at BumbleBee, I'm the queen bee, and I'm here to give the buzz to my sweet honeybees. So in the name of good morals, monetization, and not getting smited, I'm gonna talk about your least favorite S word. Back in the 1700s, America was chillin'. They just beat Britain in a war, which alone could be its own video. They were starting to build their own country, particularly in these southern colonies, using forced unpaid labor that you can't leave. Oh, and your boss can do heinous things to you because he owns you. Their economy was agricultural based and stayed that way for a long time. Tobacco being the #1 crop at first, cotton was still grown but wasn't as popular due to the processing of cotton being a very labor intensive and difficult process. This was until Eli Whitney's cotton gin, invented in 1794. The cotton gin was a machine that quickly removed seeds and processed cotton, making cotton a very valuable crop since, you know, the people harvesting the cotton are YouTube's least favorite S word. It's a brutal unpaid workforce. Now that it was profitable, cotton boomed and the South became very wealthy. While not exactly the main reason, the South getting rich off Whitney's design and did somewhat create a divide between the southern states and the northern states, eventually leading to the Civil War. Also, apparently plantation owners didn't pay Eli for his machine and he went broke. Just trashy behavior all around, man, come on. Number 6. Yes, I'm a Russian submarine commander. I actually couldn't believe this one myself, but the submarine was invented in the 1700s. Having designs and plans started in the 1500s, the first real use of a submersible vessel wasn't until 1775, named the Turtle, an acorn-shaped vessel with a crew of just one. To me, it's just hard to think that in the same century we were beginning to master flight and sea travel. I also can't stop thinking that if there was a water ride that existed, it would be pretty cool if you went underwater in like a pod, like a submarine kind of thing. Just an idea for the mouse and the corporation. Of course, it wouldn't be years until after the Turtle that the submarine would see effective use. Or have a Scottish man play a Russian submarine commander in a really good movie. Russian submarine commander. Number 5. Dawn of the punch card. With the Industrial Revolution on the horizon, many things were about to change. Probably the most obvious at the time was factories. While not the first, Richard Arkwright's Cromford Mill in 1771 is what most resembles a modern factory today. Cromford Mill was the first water-powered cotton spinning mill and initially employed 200 workers. It ran day and night with 2 12-hour work shifts, the gates being locked at 6 AM and 6 PM, permitting no late arrivals. Oh, he likes to keep a tight schedule. Yeah, I can see the beginnings of a modern factory, alright. All you're missing is Bezos and a couple of drones to make it modern. All jokes aside though, these early factories changed the very fabric of not only Britain, but also the world. I mean, where would we be today with all that lovely pollution and those great and fair working conditions? I bet there was benefits too. Number 4. The golden liquid. You drink liquid and then it's gonna come out of you. It's simple, it's science. But sometimes other fluids need to be drained. Sometimes you can have difficulty using the little boys' room. Personally, I'm still learning how to put down the toilet seat. I haven't quite figured that one out. How to make pee when a person cannot pee. Portly founding father Benjamin Franklin thought to himself as he was holding a kite in the rain. This is something I learned, which I didn't know, is that he invented the flexible catheter. Yep. Next time you feel a little weird because a tube is being inserted into a sensitive area, you can thank the man on the $100 bill. Invented in 1752 in order to aid his brother with bladder stones. It's strange though, you think of a guy inventing other things, but in reality, it's a really important invention and something that's very common in the medical world today. I just hope to stay healthy long enough so no tube has to go near my founding father. Number 3. Pseudo-cool. Okay, so back in the 1700s, food was really hard to keep. For example, meat is packed with a salty brine in order to preserve it. It either has to be shipped overseas or last long enough through a cold and brutal winter. But plans for refrigeration were being drawn up, specifically the idea of vapor compression refrigeration. Not exactly the fridge that's in your kitchen today, considering there's still no main harnessing of electricity, which makes fridges run, but a brilliant idea nonetheless. While the fridge we know was still far away, it's crazy to think in the 1700s we had serious plans for one. While this was being developed, food was kept near lakes and snows in the winter. Runoffs from mountains were often used to keep drinks cool. I think this is something we all take for granted. I mean, could you imagine drinking room temperature milk or having a beef dinner that tastes saltier than salt? Looking back through history, it's interesting to see how humans persevere. As much as I love food, I don't know if I could stomach food from the past. Thank goodness we don't eat anything gross today. Hey man, do you have any canned cheese left? I'm kinda hungry. Number 2. Ebony, ivory, living together in harmony. I honestly thought this one was older than the 1700s, but hey, here we are, invented in the year 1700 by a musically inclined Italian gentleman named Bartolomeo Cristofori. Unhappy with what was going on at the time, he decided to spice it up by changing out a few parts of some common instruments, and started using little hammers that strike quickly on chords and come back in hopes they would not dampen the sound. A little fine tuning here and there and bada bing bada boom, you got a piano. I would attempt to make a joke about the piano, but let's be honest, no piano, no Elton John. No jazz, no Frank Sinatra. If you're asking me, that's a big problem. Number 1. ABCs. As someone who struggles with reading, this one makes me want to hide under my covers at night. I spent countless hours as a kid learning to read, and oh, man, the phonics lessons were brutal. And thanks to this invention, I can blame it all on the 1755 invention, the English Dictionary. Yep, that's right. One of the most influential too. Written by Samuel Johnson, it took 7 years to compile all the words I can't pronounce. He was commissioned 1,500 guineas for the project, which is worth about £250,000 today. Until the completion of the Oxford Dictionary 173 years later, Johnson's dictionary is considered to be the preeminent English dictionary and a huge achievement in scholarship. I mean, you gotta give the guy credit for writing this. Imagine writing an English essay for 7 years. But then again, £250,000 for some of my writing also sounds pretty good. All I have to do now is learn to read. and right. Number 10, the smell-o-vision. Oh, this is bad. We've come a long way since the dawn of filmmaking. Imagine all of your movies costing 5 cents and all in black and white with no sound. Ooh, what a time to be alive. Today, obviously, we have color, sound, virtual reality, and those moving boxes at the movies, which honestly I'm not crazy about. They shake too much. I'm not a big fan. Same with the 3D. Those glasses that we used to wear, we don't really do the 3D anymore. It was bad. Anyway, some people think that's not enough. Some people want more. Enter the smell-o-vision, created by a man named Hans Lube. I mean, that's just that just writes itself, doesn't it? The idea is that while you are watching a movie, you can smell the smells on screen. A field of grass, a car chase with burning rubber, a breakfast scene. My issue is what happens if I leave the smell-o-vision on and I fall asleep on the couch and reruns of Dirty Jobs comes on? Ooh, yucky. Or better yet, you guys have a smell-o-vision and you're watching my bloopers. Uh-oh, stinky. That wouldn't be very good, would it? Number 9, the Virtual Boy. This one's just crazy. I doubt many people would remember this, and in Nintendo's defense, they usually know what they're doing. Well, most of the time. Usually. There's so many remasters that they could do. It's a license to print money. I don't know why they don't. Come on, Nintendo, I'm waiting for it. The Virtual Boy, however, oh boy. I wouldn't expect many to have seen it since the sales were poor. The Virtual Boy was a 32-bit portable console that was basically a headset, except, you know, there's no straps to put it around your head, but a stand so you can play games on it while laying prone? Yeah, I'm not sure. My back hurts just looking at it. Doesn't make a lot of sense. The main selling point was the graphics. It was a big topic back in the 90s. The Virtual Boy was capable of 3D, which was huge for the time. Way ahead of its time. Except it was stereographic 3D and monochrome red. Everything was just shades of red. So watching footage of the gameplay gives me a headache, as I'm sure playing it would. So I can see why laying on your living room floor playing this, well, it sucks. Number 8, the black powder mousetrap. Mice. They're everywhere, and they suck. At least the wild ones. Some people got cute pets. So we place mouse traps to get rid of them. However, sometimes we get our fingers cut, which also sucks. Oh man, it hurts really bad. Or if you're a friend of Johnny Knoxville, it hurts all over. They do a lot of weird stuff with mouse traps. Love those guys. However, one design of mousetrap I think is the worst because it could potentially end your life is the black powder mousetrap. It was essentially just like ye olde cannons of the time. Black powder, big iron ball, except just on a much tinier scale. And in the house, because, you know, having a cannon go off in the house is a great idea. Sure, let's just have that. That makes a lot of sense, yeah. Number 7, Back to the Future. During the technological boom of electronics in the 1980s, there was one invention I think is really unusual. Computers, camcorders, and even home video game consoles were becoming commonplace all over the world. People who are familiar with retro Nintendo consoles are familiar with the likes of Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, or Contra. You may even remember a certain gaming accessory involving a laughing dog every time you miss a duck. What 80s kids might not remember is the Konami Laser Scope. Similar to Nintendo's Zapper, but with 2 key differences. 1, it's a headset instead of a pistol. 2, it's voice controlled, meaning when you come across enemies in game, you have to shout fire to fire in game. The Konami Laser Scope was bold and tried to be ahead of its time, but when taking a good look at it, 1, it makes the user just look ridiculous, and 2, it doesn't work. Reviews for the headset are not favorable and just defeat the purpose of using a headset. Today we have VR headsets that may seem just as ridiculous, but they work, and the use of voice still isn't a primary control used in games today. Number 6, Battleship Woodchip. This is one of my favorites. Okay, hear me out for this one. Back in the 1940s, there was a really super not very fun expensive war happening. Germany, Japan, and Italy needed to go into the timeout corner. But after a while of people trying to put each other in the timeout corner, things were getting super expensive. World War II was fought on all fronts, land, sea, and air. The sea being a key part of the war victory in the beginning of the war. Literally tons of war goods and ships were being sunk by German U-boats every day across the Atlantic. So, in order to cut costs, what if the ships were built out of something cheaper, but just as tough as steel? Concrete, right? Nope, I bet you weren't thinking ice. Or more specifically, sawdust and ice mixed to form pykrete. Testing with pykrete had gone so well that in a super secret general meeting, pykrete was presented, shot at in the meeting, ricocheting a bullet causing another general a flesh wound. Having its defense capabilities proven in the war room, Operation Habakkuk was greenlit, and the Allies were planning on constructing an aircraft carrier made out of ice and sawdust to help thwart the German U-boats. However, this was scrapped, as a boat made of sawdust and ice would really not be much help against a German U-boat. Plus, where do you sleep? Can you cook on there? Way more questions than answers. Number 5. Hello there! Channeling our inner General Grievous, our number 5 spot belongs to the monowheel. Originally designed in the 19th century, it wasn't until the 20th century they slapped a motor on one of these bad boys and did their best escape attempt from Utapau. Sorry, I'm a Star Wars guy. It just looks like the vehicle from the third movie, I can't help myself. In reality, the monocycle is a single-wheeled motorized vehicle where the driver either sits inside the wheel housing or right beside it. Today these vehicles are still around, but really only used for entertainment purposes, as the design does have a few issues. One wheel gives balance issues, there's a visibility issue since, well, you know, you're usually sitting inside the wheel, and an issue called gerbling, which basically means if the driver brakes too hard, the inner ring will overcome its own gravity and the driver will do a full loop, similar to how a gerbil spins around on its wheel. Seeing that would make Monday morning traffic a lot more amusing though, I gotta say. Number 4. Deep breath, my equine friend. World War I was the war to end all wars, except for the 10 major wars that came after it. Noted for being the bloodiest and most destructive conflict at the time, it gave humanity a bunch of cool and exciting inventions, so long as they were not being used on you. One of the worst things to come out of the First World War was the extensive use of trench warfare and chemical weapons, or more specifically chlorine gas. Trench warfare was brutal, not only in its barbaric over-the-top charges into machine gun fire, but also in its living. Trenches had terrible living conditions, and were difficult to take from the enemy. Crossing no man's land was no joke. So, to eliminate the pesky enemies entrenched in their trenches, the very cruel chlorine gas was used, causing nausea, violent coughing, chest pain, and corneal burns. Just about everything you'd find on the back of normal medication, right? Gas masks helped when they were available, but unfortunately they were not the only living creatures on the battlefield. This is where our invention comes in. The very depressing invention of the horse gas mask. The idea is the same. Horses need protection too, and since World War I was still a war powered by horses, it was more common than you might think, and a lot of our equine friends perished alongside us. Number 3. Wilson! Some of you may have been cool enough back in 1975 to own a pet rock. Some of you may have not. Looking back, it doesn't really make any sense. Sure, everyone needs something to keep them company. Tom Hanks would have never gotten off the island he was stranded on if it wasn't for Wilson. Imagine a world without Tom Hanks. I, for one, would not want to live in such a world. All jokes aside, the pet rock was a genius marketing campaign, very similar to the fidget spinner of recent years. It's proof that if you can get a fad trade rolling, you can sell anything. Now who wants some of my bathwater? Number 2. Chef's Kiss. Okay, it's 1958. Times are good. Cars have cool fins on them, Elvis is on the radio, and most of my post-traumatic stress disorder has cleared up since the war was over. It's all great. Ah yes, life is good. I can't wait to enjoy some modern cuisine. Well, let's see what's on the menu. I'll have to start with the frozen cheese salad. I'll have ham and banana hollandaise. And for dessert, I'll have the lime jello tuna pie. If that doesn't sound appetizing, I don't know what does. For some reason, halfway through the century, people just lost their taste buds. They were coming up with all kinds of disgusting foods. A lot of them are in loaf form for some strange reason. I think the grossest item that you can come across is a little invention called hongar. Sounds like somebody from Skyrim, but nay good sir. Hongar is a mixture of honey and apple cider vinegar. It was thought to provide great health benefits. The only thing that would give me is a spot in front of the toilet refunding my breakfast. Oof. Number 1. Krümellauf. Germany was having a really hard time in World War II. The United States, Canada, Britain, Australia, France, and Russia too were all coming to give the mustache man a piece of their mind. Heavily outnumbered, it was time for a miracle. Time to see what top German scientists had up their sleeve. We have a rifle that can shoot around the corners. Isn't it wunderbar? Yeah, this thing is real. A curved barrel called a Krümellauf, used for shooting around tight spaces like corners and out of tank hatches. During the waning years of the war, Germany was coming up with all kinds of crazy inventions to turn the tide. But a rifle that can shoot around corners probably isn't the answer. Number 10. The National Razor. What's a revolution without a little blood being spilt? Wouldn't really be a revolution, would it? France was having a hard time in the 1700s, so they needed a brand new way to get rid of pesky monarchs and anyone who isn't warming up to the revolutionary ideals. And what better way to keep people warm by cleaving their heads from their body? A man named Joseph Ignaz Guillotine suggested that there was a better method for unaliving those who needed needed to be unalived. A common misconception is that he invented the guillotine, but rather suggested its implementation, where his name would become synonymous with such a terrible device. Basically, you got a wood frame with a hole for your noggin and a large angled blade. Blade drops down from frame and removes the head of state from the governing body, which isn't just a clever joke, as that's what happened to the last king and queen of France. By the time of its invention and the end of its use all the way up into the 1970s, yes, that's right, it was used up until the 70s, thousands of people met their doom to the national razor. Number 9. Party favors in the sky. When you think of air travel today, you think of lots of space for you and your fellow passengers, meals that are flavorful and affordable. Air travel in 2021 is a stress-free, very organized way to travel. But in the 1700s, these luxuries of the sky were non-existent, as there was no air travel. Any international travel was done by ship, which took months at a time and was not a pleasurable experience, opposite to what was described above. Two French brothers wanted to change this, or rather just get off the ground. The two French brothers, Montgolfier, developed and flew the first unmanned hot air balloon on September 19, 1783. This was shortly followed up with a manned flight by Jean-François Pilote de Rosier. This was a very strange invention at the time, as this was really the beginning of humans and flight. Number 8. Puckle needs his gun. Ever since black powder first made it to Europe and Europeans figured out you could make big gun that go boom, people have been trying to come up with better and faster ways to make gun go boom. In the 1700s, the biggest issue with muskets and cannons at the time was reloading, or getting multiple shots off. Loading black powder weapons isn't easy. I'd say ask a pirate, but you can't. Those kind of pirates are all gone now. So to fix the issue of the day, a man named James Puckle invented the very cleverly named Puckle gun. Basically, he just added more chambers of shot rotating around one barrel. Although his idea for the time was genius, in practice it wasn't very effective, as flintlock and black powder are really the main issue. Clumsy, lots of smoke, and does not want to work in less than fair weather conditions. Number 7. Gee, this cane is heavy. As people began to settle down after imperial monarchies went the way of the dodo bird, it was a good idea in everyone's best interest to limit people carrying weapons. If people didn't have swords, it could make another revolution a little less bloody. But what's that I hear from upper class wealthy people who don't want to listen to the rules that they make? Well, how about concealed and hidden swords? Yep, that's right. Cane swords were a popular fashion accessory in the 19th century. As carrying swords fell out of fashion, royal men needed to take swords with them for self-defense, or so they thought. Even women were concealing these hidden bladed inventions in parasols. However, it was socially unacceptable for a woman to have such possessions, let alone have the ability to know such training. As time went on, the hidden compartments that held blades were replaced with my personal favorite item, a flask. Number 6. Look at all these cool chickens. Let's face it, we all went through our awkward phases in life. And if you didn't live through the early 2000s as a youth, then bands like Linkin Park and My Chemical Romance just don't hit as hard. So when trying to find the weirdest inventions of the 1800s, I felt like closing my bedroom door and playing Green Day as I dye my hair because I'm super serious about how I feel. Why do I feel this teenage angst, you ask? Well, that's because there's rose-tinted glasses for chickens. Yeah, and they're cooler than me. Ugh. Yeah, little tiny eyeglasses for chickens, but they actually have a good use. They were designed to prevent pecking and cannibalizing other chickens. Ooh. The theory goes that if a chicken was wearing rose-tinted glasses, he couldn't distinguish between blood and what wasn't. That way they wouldn't attack each other. Yet another heartwarming comfort from the 1800s. Number 5. I'm coming out of this hole, partner. We enjoy many luxuries in the 21st century. Warm houses, everyday appliances, and the freedom to shout profanities at strangers on the internet you slightly disagree with, but you give them the business anyway because it's been a bad week and you deserve it. But probably what we should all be thankful for is modern medicine. Back in the 1800s, it just wasn't where it is today. A great example of that is safety coffins. A truly grim situation. A medical doctor has declared you dead. Now you are being buried alive. Have no fear, friends, because you had enough money for a safety coffin. The coffin contained a device or means of various designs, which was to alert the living of your mistaken burial and hopeful resurrection. The very rational fear of being buried alive most likely was spun from fiction and news at the time, with the occasional case happening here and there. However, I'm of the opinion it should be a never ever kind of thing. Yeah, no thanks. Number 4. Your bad hair day has just been terminated. Oh, to live in a time of industrial revolution where machines go and go. I'm sure that all this heavy industry won't enable bad practices of corporations and usher in the destruction of our environment. Pfft, no sir! This is the age of machines, and if machines can help with one thing, it most certainly can aid in another. May I introduce you the rotary hairbrush? Why brush your own hair when an overcomplicated machine can do it for you? At the time, it kinda made sense. Machines felt like they were the way of the future. They were kind of right, but at this rate everything in the home would have intricate pulleys or a steam engine attached. Steampunk anyone? Number 3. Full of air. The Industrial Revolution changed the world, we can't deny that. That can also be said for the steam trains. But what about pneumatic power trains? Back in the 1800s, a man named Alfred Eli Beach came up with such a design. Prior testing had proven useful enough to build a larger demonstration in New York. So he built a tunnel to test his air-powered train. It only ran a short distance, but the train held 22 people and was controlled by a roots blower nicknamed the Western Tornado. That was also my nickname in high school. Sadly, the project didn't receive much support from the government at the time, and other methods for trains eventually took over. Unfortunate, because it sounds like Alfred Eli Beach was very dedicated to the project, as he put up a very large sum of money to the project. The tunnel that housed the short train line was completed in 58 days. While he did have bigger plans for his train, it kinda just became an amusement for people. It was shortly shut down thereafter. But 58 days, that's pretty quick. I'd like to see that happen in a major city now. No way it's happening. Number 2. Get on my mongoose, bro. Looking at the Motor Scout, you can see the beginnings of what could be a 4-wheeler. Personally, I think it looks like a mongoose from Halo, but Mom thinks I play too many games. Designed by F.R. Sims in the late 1890s, it was never really meant for off-road terrain, instead to support infantry on smooth roads. Sims, understanding the annoyance of trying to ride your motorized quad cycle while someone is firing at you, placed a Maxim machine gun on the quad to return fire. Which is strange, because usually these things require a team of soldiers to operate. He also added an iron shield for a little extra protection. It is too bad the next major conflict would have a lack of usable roads and more trenches than anything else. While it never did see combat, it was somewhat useful, and would later inspire Sims to design the first armored car. Number 1. Bro, trust me. Everyone has a favorite article of clothing. For sports fans out there, it could be a lucky jersey, but back in the 1800s there was an article of clothing no British soldier could be without. The cholera belt. What does a cholera belt do exactly? Well, it helps to prevent cholera. I've got good sources, bro, trust me. The running not-so-scientific theory at the time was that any abdominal issues and sickness was caused by a chilly belly. So simply make your tummy warm and voila, cholera has been prevented. British soldiers in India were often given the belts unaware of the biohazard that was an epidemic. The belts were just flannel that basically wrapped around you. It's a good thing we're not superstitious today and would never buy into such ridiculousness. Hey man, did my order of healing crystals come in? I'm getting some bad voodoo vibes at home lately, man. I totally need to cleanse that space, bro.
And to start us at number 10 is the car phone. Our first dabbling with mobile phones ironically came in the form of our vehicles. These funky and clunky phones could be carried in briefcases that were to be stored and charged in the car, or were straight up just built into it. This could be in the center or backseat console, the dashboard, the driver's side door, endless possibilities. The car phone was at its best and most high-tech during the 90s and was definitely part of the very important technology for very important people fad and a mindset. If you weren't born to see them in person, perhaps you've seen them in 90s film and TV hits, shows like Seinfeld and Friends, and iconic scenes like in Die Hard when Bruce Willis is saving the day and they flip to a shot of Argyle oblivious of the chaos above whilst talking to his sweet honey on the car phone. I hope you have fast reflexes because Bop It is number 9. Originally invented in 1996, this handheld toy quickly became worldwide success and a popular toy, models of it winning numerous awards for electronic toys and games. To jog your memory or teach some new folks, the original game of Bop It has 3 main features. Bop It was a button on the side, Twist It was a twisting handle on the lower left side, and Pull It was a pullable handle near the top. The device would call out one of the 3 instructions, increasing the speed as the game progressed. Whenever the player fumbled or missed the call, the game was over. Players' scores are announced at the end of the gameplay with a cipher in which different tones represent different point values, and the maximum possible score is 100. The 3 were spread widespread enough to require quick reflex and have 3 game modes: solo play, multiplayer play, and beat bopping, which followed a musical tone. This game was the first of what was later to become a series of bop it games relying on the same set of basic patents. For number 8, it's the Palm Pilot. Let's take a second and remember this pre-cell phone, the grandmother of handheld digital devices. PDAs, personal digital assistants for my young people, were truly beloved of the 90s, but none more so than the Palm Pilot, which took everyone by storm. A businessman glued to his Palm Pilot was an ongoing cliche in 90s movies. They could check emails, work on documents, they had little games on them as well. They came with a writing stylus that would only work on the screen of that device. Convenient until you lost yours and had to go out and buy a new one. Yes, they truly had all the features of a futuristic parking meter with its unlit display and few hundred kilobytes. This device is laughable if you have an 8GB phone because you have the memory storage of 16,000 Palm Pilots. Next up is a bit of an oddball. It's the Oxford Bell batteries, number 7. And unlike most entries on this list, scientists could probably figure out how the Oxford Bell batteries worked literally tomorrow if they tried. But why aren't they? Well, see, in order to do that experiment, they'd need to end another experiment, which is somehow inexplicably kept going for, over 180 plus years on accident. See, this bell has been ringing since 1840 when it was built by the London firm Watkins & Hill. They created 2 dry pile batteries to power the bell's swing. 2 batteries that should have died within weeks, yet somehow these primitive batteries are still going, leading experts to realize their internal composition must be unique to have kept going on so strongly. Though scientists are desperate to figure out said composition, the bell is one of the oldest ongoing experiments in the world, and to see what made it continue for so long means ending it prematurely, which is just too great of a cost. So I guess we're waiting for the battery to die, if it ever does. We've hit the mid-video point, so I'm going to talk about 2 points to you that the everyday person has definitely heard of. But what they haven't heard of is their history. So let's start with number 6, the enema. That's right, as talked about in the recent video, Top 10 Dark Secrets of the Maya Civilization, enemas are quite literally as old as time itself. What is an enema? For my sweet summer children that have somehow not been exposed to the literal down under of the medical world, an enema is a fluid injection in the back door for the purposes of clearing a bowel. However, cultures in pre-Columbian times and quite a few others did use it for ingesting substances to get a quicker effect. The earliest medical text in existence, Egyptian Eber's Papyrus of 1550 BCE, mentions the enema, which they believed was invented by the god Thoth. The Olmecs, who predated even the Mayans, used enemas for rituals as well as for disease, as did the Mayans, as documented during the colonial period, e.g. in the Florentine Codex. Heck, in Parisian society, they were doing enemas as many as 3 a day. Louis XIV was said to have taken over 2,000 in his lifetime. Enemas were known in ancient Sumeria, Babylonia, India, Greece, and China. The indigenous of North America, even though far removed, independently discovered them as well. In fact, there's hardly a region in the world where people did not discover or adopt the enema, and as a result, we can't actually say who invented it first and who shared the information with who. It seems as a whole society collectively agreed we should put some stuff back there and see what comes out. The second one you've heard of, and I'd be worried if you didn't, is feminine hygiene, number 5. People of the world had to find a solution for that once-a-month nightmare, and historically the creation of menstruation products has been dependent on geographical location, cultural attitudes towards menstruation, and available materials. Some examples are in the 5th century BC, a Greek physician and father of Western medicine, Hippocrates, wrote that in Greece they used wool wrapped around wooden splints as tampons. As documented in the 10th century, however, they also fashioned wool into rags that they would simply fold and tuck. This information comes to us from the lovely story of a woman who is said to have thrown one of her used menstrual rags at an admirer in an attempt to get him to leave her alone. Ancient Egyptians are thought to have used papyrus fibers in a similar fashion to the Greek tampon. Their strategy was more like rolling a very tight scroll that would act as a cork, as papyrus isn't absorbent. Ancient Japan also used paper in a similar fashion. Some indigenous populations used grass mats, which women would sit upon in lodges meant for those who were menstruating. The naturally absorbent grass would just soak everything up. Another popular indigenous style in North America was buffalo skin or moss. And last but not least, in ancient Chinese culture, sand or dried grass was tightly packed and then wrapped in fabric before being used as a pad-like device for protection, although ovular versions of this were made to be inserted in a tampon-like fashion. All in all, just like our last point, multiple cultures conjured up their own solutions for menstruation, and many of them were decomposable. It's not possible to know who made them first as a result, but it's quite obvious everyone had their own answers. Next up is an invention that Mythbusters couldn't even figure out. It's the heat ray, number 4. Greek mathematician Archimedes is one day sat down and dreamed big, and what he developed from that was the heat ray weapon that defied, as mentioned, even the skills of Discovery Channel's Mythbusters to replicate in 2004. This weapon is quite simple. To quote, it's quite literally ranks of polished bronze shields reflecting the sun rays at enemy ships. The ships were moored within the bow and arrow range, and according to legend, the Roman ships burned by the collective condensed sunlight shining from these mirrors. Ship after ship in the Roman fleet caught fire and sank into the Mediterranean. Although Mythbusters failed to reproduce this ancient weapon and declared it a myth, MIT students succeeded 1 year after the MB experiment in 2005. They actually managed to combust a boat in San Francisco Harbor. Sadly, the heat ray, if it did exist in the olden times, did not save Archimedes. The Roman soldiers eventually breached Syracuse's walls, and despite orders from Claudius Marcellus that Archimedes not be harmed, one of the invaders killed him during the sack of the city. And the seismoscope is next up for number 3, and it's the first earthquake detecting tool in history. Yet you wouldn't guess it by looking at this ornate golden dragon festooned toad surrounded vessel from around 132 AD. The basic premise was as follows. When the earth, quakes, one of the dragons, each representing principal directions of the compass, would spit out a bronze ball into the toad's mouth, indicating the direction of the quake. The instrument was said to have detected a 400-mile distance earthquake, which was not felt at the location of the device. But to this day, no one actually knows what's inside the artifact or how it works. If we want to find out, we'd have to quite literally break the thing, similar to the Oxford bells. Some say it could have been a simple pendulum-based system, but the exact science remains a mystery. Number 2 is the iconic Roman concrete. Why is it iconic? Stamina, baby! You can't even breathe near modern-day pieces of cement without blowing a damn pothole in the thing. Yet the Colosseum still stands after what's essentially, in my tiny brain, a bajillion years. Why is that? Ash. Not as in it was like ashy, slap some lotion on it, but like actual volcanic ash. Researchers have worked in recent years to uncover the secret of this ancient concrete's longevity, and the secret was in front of their faces the whole time. An article published in 2013 by the University of California Berkeley News Center announced that the university researchers described for the first time how the extraordinary stable compound calcium aluminum silicate hydrate, abbreviated to just CASH, binds the material. The process of making it would create a lower carbon dioxide emission than the process of making modern concrete. Some disadvantages of its use, however, is that it takes longer to dry, and although it lasts longer, it is weaker. Did the Romans add ash intentionally, recognizing, even without all the big sciencey words for it, that it added to the longevity? That's the next thing for scientists to crack. And now, last but never least, is number 1, the flexible glass. Yeah, that's right, glass, but make it flexible. However, there are only 3 ancient accounts of the substance known as Vertrum flexile, and they don't make it exactly clear enough to determine if the substance really existed. The story of its invention was first told by Petronius in 63 AD. He wrote about a glassmaker who presented the Emperor Tiberius, who reigned from 14 to 37 AD, with a glass vessel. He asked the emperor to hand it back to him, at which point the glassmaker, to the shock of the king's court, threw it at the floor. Everyone expected to hear it shatter, but it didn't break. The strange glass only dented, which the glassmaker hammered back into shape quickly. So what did the emperor do to award this amazing God-sent invention? Completely panic. Apparently, fearing the devaluation of precious metals, Tiberius literally ordered the inventor be beheaded, so the secret died with him. Pliny the Elder of 79 AD told this story as well, but he also said that although the story was frequently told, it may not be entirely true. The version told a couple hundred years later by Dio Cassius morphed the glassmaker into some sort of magician, and when the vessel was thrown at the floor, it did break, but the glassmaker just magicked it back together. In 2012, the glass manufacturing company Corning introduced its flexible willow glass. Heat resistant and flexible enough to be rolled up, it's proven especially useful in making solar panels. But if that unfortunate Roman glassmaker did indeed invent Vertrum flexile, then he was thousands and thousands of years ahead of his time.
Number 10, the bullet mousetrap. You might have heard me say that and said, what? Which is exactly what I said when I saw a mousetrap that's main killing potential was to fire a lead slug Minuteman style at a small rodent. It is no exaggeration to say that the difference between this mousetrap and a musket is that a musket weighs a little bit more. The mousetrap was loaded just like a traditional musket of the time, with black powder, a lead ball, and even a percussion cap. In all honesty, I'm not sure how you go about defending this mousetrap. Textbook definition of overkill. Also, you know, there's a loaded firearm in the house with a hair trigger that a small rodent could set off by gently grazing it. I like to imagine a fun family game of, do I no longer have a sister, or was that just a mouse, after hearing a small musket fire inside the home. I also had to mention that while the immediate danger of a .32 caliber lead ball finding a new home in your stomach is frightening enough, black powder being black powder is very volatile and produces a lot of energy. Fire hazard. Smokey the fire safety dog does not approve. Number 9. Tea for men. Winding the clock back to the 1800s, you'll find pictures of distinguished ladies and gentlemen. And these distinguished gentlemen have the fullest and thickest mustaches ever grown by man. Much care is needed to maintain such a manly image. So when an established gentleman goes for his morning tea, it would be rather unfortunate to get his mustache wet and ruin his dashing good looks. An invention of the 1800s beckons to solve this issue with the mustache cup. Mustache cups were invented so the chivalrous men of the day didn't ruin their grooming rituals with a cup of Earl Grey tea. The cups had a small porcelain mouthpiece with a smaller hole for drinking, while the main piece would protect the stash. It may sound ridiculous, but it almost looks like a modern travel mug. So maybe they were onto something. Number 8. Nightmare story. I don't know about you guys, but no matter how you present them, dolls are just creepy. Have you ever noticed that when someone has a creepy doll, it's never just one? There's always a bunch of them for some reason. I don't know, I wouldn't want the room to feel safe or welcoming after all. One man in 1871 said, I know, let's make them even creepier by having them move themselves. The creeping doll, as it was called, was a doll-like automaton that had clock-like gears to simulate real human movement, with the addition of hidden wheels underneath to aid in the doll moving across the floor. Because, you know, the last thing I need is this doll creeping into my bed at night.
Number 7. Electric corset. I thought this was one of those corsets like shapewear, but apparently the electric corset was used to help women with a weak back, chills, and rheumatism. Created by a man named Cornelius Bennett Harness, he has said that every married man should buy his beautiful wife an electric corset, and in the ad it says the appearance of these corsets do not differ from those that are usually worn, being made of the same material in parentheses best quality, in the latest style and most approved shapes. They are in fact the very best thing for ladies, young or old, especially those with a weak back and chills, rheumatism, and even hysteria. It also helps with internal complaints, or complaints in general, loss of appetite, nervous dyspepsia, kidney disorders, and so much more. I mean, if a corset can do all that, then sign me up. The electric corset was magnetic rather than electric because it all had magnetized steel busk in the plates at the front that attached together to fasten the corset. The articles and the selling of this corset ended up being a flop anyway, as it resulted in a lot of customers demanding their money back. Even at one point they got arrested because it was a scam and the jury couldn't make a formal decision about Harness. The courts ordered the company that he would, wound up bankrupt, and almost immediately Harness tried to resurrect the corset company, and Medical Electric Institute was allowed to do so on the condition that it was under control of a qualified medic, ensuring that the corset actually works. It didn't end up working though, because his reputation as a shady man was already out in the open. Number 6. Exercise chair. I've seen those weird inventions on infomercials like the shake weight, the sauna suit, or the vibro belt. Well, in the Victorian era they too didn't want to work out normally and wanted to cut the exercise to less work, so they made the exercise chair. It was basically like a swing with springs you just sit on and just bounce. Kinda like a baby bouncer machine to make babies get used to their feet. But this machine was to force you to just sit and bounce. I don't know, I mean it just seems lazy. But every person's fitness journey is unique to them, so maybe it'll help jump start it for you. Or sit start it. Or bounce start it. I don't know. You know what I mean. But in some good intentions, the invention was actually helpful to those who were disabled and helped them to get exercise. Maybe the chair should come back. Number 5. Electric hairbrush. If you got long hair, this would intrigue you until the motor stops running and you're stuck on the machine trying to yank your hair out. Brushing one's hair is a tedious task, especially if it's long, and I would know. But for the Victorians, they always wanted to find a way to make things easier, so they made this electric hairbrush actually powered by magnets. They were actually marketed at Victorians who feared that they were going bald. It was also claimed that they could cure constipation, malaria, lameness, rheumatism, again, blood diseases, and paralysis. I don't know if a hairbrush can do that, but good luck. Number 4. The grenade fire extinguisher. Of course, fire was a scary notion in the Victorian era as it was very prevalent and difficult to reduce, as they had many great fires that affected large portions of towns and cities. So they thought, hey, if we can't get to the rest of the areas at once, why don't we just toss a grenade fire extinguisher over. This fire extinguisher was designed to be thrown like a grenade, and it was even patented in 1883. However, the glass bottle contained poison toxic liquids which could enter the body and damage the lungs, kidneys, and liver. So you could toss it, but just stay away from it. In the end though, this invention turned out to be a big flop. Although the concept was nice, it really didn't do much. Number 3. Air-conditioned top hat. It can be very hot in the summer, even if you want to look fashionable. It can be tough when your outfit is drenched in sweat. So in order to avail from getting sweaty, try the new air conditioning top hat. This wonderful and and very underachieved invention is the bona fide ventilated top hat as advertised by John Fuller and Company in 1849. The bona fide ventilating hat would have allowed men to wear hats without overheating. It had a vent at the top of the hat and basically would help circulate air into the man's head while still wearing the hat. I mean, it was a very moderate trend like every other trend we see, but it didn't last long as trends die out hard. Number 2, the garrote proof collar. At first I thought this was a dog collar, and that's exactly what it is, a collar, but not for your dog, for you. But why would you need one? Unless it's for other things, wink wink. But if it's not, it was cause getting strangled was very common as well in the 1800s. So what else is more strangle proof than a garrote proof collar? This design was for anti-garroting cravat, or anti-strangling, which could be worn underneath the collar. The fact that they had to make an invention just to prevent people from getting strangled is saying a lot. The question is, did it work? Number 1, artificial leech. With great medical care, you can guarantee your doctor will get you the best leeches to help you get rid of that bad blood causing you to get sick. But because leeches were actually hard to come by and it was actually a occupation for someone to get said leeches to sell to doctors, the profession in itself was getting expensive as well. So the artificial leech was created. During the Victorian era, scientific and medical research boomed as doctors experimented with all kinds of cures and treatments. According to researchers of this era, using leeches for bloodletting proved so popular that it led to a shortage of the worms. And so this artificial leech was used to stimulate the similar effects of extracting said bad blood out, which to be honest may actually work for some treatments. After all, bloodletting is still used today in the treatments of few diseases, including hemochromatosis and polycythemia. Even its practice, it's specifically trained by practitioners in hospitals using techniques also known as therapeutic phlebotomy.